And we are live.
Yes, we are. Yes.
How are you doing, Angela?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for asking. Excited about the topic today and also excited to wrap up the DevOps Handbook. It's been a wild ride.
We have been hustling, okay?
Yeah, I don't have my book to hold up today. I'm working off the Kindle and Audible version on my phone.
That is okay.
So I'll just hold that up today.
That is okay. But we did it. We took on this very weighty tome about DevOps Handbook, the second edition. We read it in it wasn't, I want to say it was unconventional because instead of doing a couple of chapters where you're kind of pacing your flow, this book is separated into parts, and it's separated into 6 parts. And it was just a logical way to kind of, some weeks you'd be full steam ahead and, all loosey-goosey. And then some weeks you're like, oh my God, I got like 400 more pages to read. So, but we did it. We stayed the course. We did what needed doing, and we finished. And we learned a lot. So let's start with chapter 21, or is it 22?
I think, yeah, this is part 6. We're jumping right in here.
Yes,
this is part 6, InfoSec and Change Management, covering chapters 22 and 23 in the book. I was excited about this one because security is so important in this day and age of digital everything, right? So we just have to keep it top of mind. And one of the things that I appreciated when they started this chapter, and I actually have a slide. I like going to my slides here for. I know.
When I heard them say they didn't use the acronym.
Yeah.
But every time they referenced confidentiality, integrity, availability, I was like, oh, CIA. Like that it's written in my margins because they're not calling it CIA. They're literally saying a mouthful.
Yeah. So and just for the folks that are following along, listening, I have on my screen a article by Myra Jaringa. The title of the article is "The CIA Triad, a Pillar of Cybersecurity." And in this article, she goes through the term CIA, or the acronym, which stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And in the book, they referred to CIA, but they didn't call it CIA. They like you said, Angela, they spelled it out. But as soon as I heard them spell it out, I was like, yo, they're going back to like the essential roots of security. And I think what is it, the National Institutes of NIST, whatever NIST stands for. I'm drawing a blank. Y'all know who NIST is, right? But they defined the CIA. And so that's kind of like the gold standard for security. So I was like really, really pleased that they brought that into this discussion. Yeah, it was really refreshing to see that.
They started off with that. It's literally in the introduction. Security is a part of everyone's job. And no truer phrase can be spoken when you work in technology. It is not just the security guy, hey, Nick. It's not just the security guy who it's his responsibility. No, it falls on all of our shoulders. And in some of these examples, the developers need skin in the game. So being able to secure their applications with the help of InfoSec by their side, having DevSecOps, literally not putting it as, at the end as a footnote. No, it really, really meant reading this. It harkened back to this is how it should be. And the fact that it was the last chapter, I was kind of bummed. I would have led with that. But I know they're always talking about the 3 ways, and that's what this book is kind of known for. Yeah. But security is a part of everyone's job, and they put it front and center. So I was very happy to read that.
Yeah, and as we get into chapter 22, and they talk about making sure that security is part of your day-to-day work. They talked about how there's one security guy to every 10 DevOps guys and gals, up to every 100 developers or whatever the case is. But
one security to 10 ops to 100 devs.
Yes.
That's, yeah. And we know there's never enough security people. We know
there's never enough. They are always the busiest people to get a hold of because they're chasing our tails, trying to like, hey, y'all broke this. This is insecure. You know, hey, you got this new standard. So we have to take it upon ourselves to help them so that we're secure out of the gate. So we definitely got to make it part of our day-to-day work.
You said it. You said it. So in chapter 22, that was actually information security is everyone's job every day. That's what they call chapter 22.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting that this book was written a little while ago. So you don't see the phrase DevSecOps as much, but I saw one iteration was DevOps
Sec. Yes.
Yeah, and I was like, see, not at the end.
It's at the end.
Put it in the middle. It's the sandwich. Without information security, think about how many times we would hear about companies in the news, with some package that has been compromised and has been put somewhere out there and someone downloaded and it snuck its way into a repo. Even with all the CI/CD pipelines and the unit tests that go on, there are examples of stuff that gets snuck by. And having all of the pieces in place, be it telemetry and logging and security and unit tests, if one does not catch it, we're hoping that the other one was. And there is a case study that mentions just that. So hopefully we'll get to that.
Yeah, indeed. And as the other part that I noted was that we can start as developers and operators being secure out of the gate, because when security comes and says, hey, we have this library that's been checked, it's been proven, use this one, it's good to go, we should just pull that one. Or if they say, hey, we have this platform that has security built into it, we're going to check your code as soon as you check it into the repository, where the case is, then we should be using those processes. So we really don't even have to think about it. We could just push our code, keep doing what we're doing. I mean, we have to keep security top of mind, but it's happening for us behind the scenes. So once we have platforms that incorporate security into the whole operation, then we're the ones that are helping those few security guys and gals do what they got to do.
Now, I will say this, there is another side to this story where security prefers to be siloed. And if you're DevOps and you're hoping to pull them in to the circle, and they're kind of doing everything from a distance and handing you a PDF with a bunch of findings and go fix it, that is not helpful for the organization. But you would be surprised. Organizations do operate like that with security still in their little, in their little silo, and not understanding that DevOps is how it's done. Not saying the tools that you used in the physical realm for monitoring and scanning and, putting agents on machines and things like that. A lot of them didn't translate well into a CI/CD pipeline, into auto scaling groups, and into containers, spinning up containers from images. So security folks have to reimagine how their job is done. Just like us ops people, we had to reimagine how we were doing our jobs. We've done them one way for so long, but at some point we had to all right, let's bring it into the current age and give it some thought. So being able to work in concert with developers, I'm hoping more security teams want to do that as well, because we want you. We want you there.
Yeah, indeed. We can't go back to the days where we had named servers. We're treating our servers as pets, and the security folks say, okay, they can get the list of servers, they can audit each and every single one and be like, okay, yeah, these are good, these are good, these are good, this one needs to be patched. But like you mentioned with containers and auto scaling groups, these servers are coming and going in seconds based on the traffic to an application or website or whatever the case is. So security is different to apply in those scenarios. And yeah, we got to catch it up. We got to bring that DevSecOps approach where security is tightly integrated going both ways, to the dev and to the ops.
It's in between both cookies. It's holding the ends together. It's basically an Oreo or a sandwich.
There you go.
A peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like, if they're literally there holding us together, we can't do it without you.
We cannot do it. We can't.
I just made myself hungry.
Yeah, right. We'll get a sandwich after the show. But because I was going to comment on your CI/CD pipeline, that's another way that we as developers and operators can bring security to the front of our work, or just like not even to the front, but this behind the scenes, it just kind of happens thing where we run our security checks as we're checking in our code, and with every release. So we get that feedback. It's not at the end when an audit is done. It's during the development cycle, and we can see the results of the security scan. We know exactly what needs to be fixed, maybe even to the point of, hey, you cannot release this code unless this stuff is remediated. And if you're in an environment where that is needed, then hey, that's what you got to do. Some folks might work around it and say, hey, we'll get to it. But knowing that a security incident can cost millions of dollars lost in whatever your business is in, or downtime, or whatever is important, to the operation, the sooner you can remediate security issues, the absolute better.
Yeah, and it also said in this chapter that trying to remediate after the fact is a much more expensive proposition than having security in the conversation, in the PI planning, in the sprints, understanding what developers are doing, and tutoring and teaching them along the way, providing them with the security tools that you use, helping them learn to use them, and see the visibility that we really harped on in that last section. Have visibility into what those issues are, security related or anything like that. Integrating it in sooner. Again, it's a much more expensive proposition if you are trying to fix things after the fact with that 17-page PDF. It's probably cheaper if you did.
And that's what I'm saying. Because like security comes in, like say you got your app, you're in beta version, you're ready to release, and you're like, oh yeah, hey, before we go live with these million folks that are going to tap into this application, let's get security to take a look at it just to make sure we're good. And then security comes, they're like, you cannot put this out here because it is broken. Like, what is this? Like, everybody can see the database, everybody can upload, or whatever the case is. So
hands up saying,
yeah, it's like, if you had thought about it earlier, then they can catch that and fix it.
Yes, indeed.
I might have had a little bit of an internet lapse there for a second.
Oh, okay. No, not a problem. This is the internet, and it happens. It happens. So we're gonna thug it out. We're gonna get through this.
Yes, pushing on through.
We are pushing on through. What other gems? Was there any gems, or were there any case studies that perked your attention?
Yes, indeed. One of them that I'm so glad they mentioned was the supply chain attack on SolarWinds. This is going back to enterprise software that just about everybody was running, and somebody got into the code and really mucked things up, and it broke a lot of systems. People had to go offline so they could fix it. People were running old versions of Windows, and they couldn't even figure out how to get into the software to fix it. And it was funky that it was the attack vector was the supply chain. Like, somebody got into the actual code, and this is the code. SolarWinds it's an observability platform for Windows operating systems or Windows servers, and they were able to push this out to a lot of places because people trusted the vendor, which just kind of shows the importance of like, hey, if you're selling a product to people, you got to make sure it works. You got to make sure it's secure. But it was very unfortunate that attackers or bad actors were able to get into that code, and it got pushed out as far as and wide as it did. And this wasn't a case study that they had in the book, but it also reminded me of the more recent XZ problem with on Linux systems,
Mhm.
where it was like a long tail process where over years people got access to an open source um, project or open source repository, the XZ, which is like it's a code compressor. It basically makes artifacts like zip files, tar files, or whatever.
Zip. Mhm.
Yeah, and if the only reason that it was caught was because somebody was running tests on a beta version of an operating system, and their test took a second slower than it normally did, and so they started to go down the rabbit hole. Now, I don't know who this person is. I have to look up into the XZ history for this incident, but shout out to my man for
Okay.
tracking down
A second response time slower, a second
1
slower.
second slower. I don't know. I'm just saying, personally, I might have let that slide. I might have chalked it up to bad Wi-Fi. I don't know. But he caught it, and it just, again, the implications of that particular attack, it would have been so widespread.
Yes.
That we might have had to shut down the whole internet for a day just to clean things up. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but just keep your stuff secure, y'all.
Yes. The moral of the story is, integrate security into your DevOps sooner rather than later.
Rather than later. Yep.
Yes, indeed.
I had a couple more notes, but I'll pause there if you want to jump in.
No, well, let's see. I think I mentioned about a breach. I'm trying to find it in my notes because unfortunately, there was a comment about, I put a comment in the margins again, and we're talking about integrating information security into production telemetry. And it was the worst thing to happen to any company that produces a service or software is for someone to say, "Excuse me, I found a bug in your product," and finding out the fact that you didn't detect it, the company that runs the service or whatever, the fact that this is very similar to the XZ, or is it XZ? Yeah,
XZ. Yeah.
It sounds very familiar, and it happens because people are used to things working a certain way, or they're just curious. And this was one of those things where the breach was detected not by an internal monitoring control, but was far more likely outside the organization. It could be a business partner or a customer who notices whatever. And I think understanding that, yes, there are blind spots. We all have them. Each organization has them. Each team has them. But I think we're better together when understanding, doing more pen testing, having the security again kind of baked in. And as you're building and pushing, things through dev and test, there's tests involved. There can be penetration testing throughout the life cycle, which, we're talking about maybe some automation packed in somewhere, but being very diligent, that's all. Mm-hmm. And the last thing you want to hear is someone pulling up and saying, "Oh, I found a bug in your software," and you're making millions of dollars off of it. It will make the news.
Indeed. And great minds think alike. That was another point that I had taken as well. Is like, isn't it crazy that security breaches aren't reported by the company themselves, but by somebody that's using that company's application or product? So that's kind of crazy. The other point that I had was like, one guy said that he would hide malicious code in unit tests because nobody looks at the unit tests.
Genius.
Nobody's running security checks on the unit tests.
So when I read that, I thought about the part, it was maybe 1 or 2 sections ago, where they were saying, when you're trying to fail over some DR, you need to make sure that your management systems and your backup, you need to have redundancy in the systems that do the monitoring and do all the things, because something like this could quite possibly happen where you can't right the ship because you don't have this part of your infrastructure running for whatever reason. And where was I going with this? I'm not even sure. But again, it's having the telemetry baked in, maybe watching what's in your unit tests, understanding that if something gets pushed in to a test, Has it been vetted? You know, has it, what do you need to do? Like, I'm sure there's a section in 22 where they're talking about creating a security telemetry in your environment, and it's looking for things just like you just said. Like, maybe unit tests need to be something that needs to be vetted. There are certain parts of the CI/CD pipeline that needs extra attention when when security probably has the tools. And again, if we're talking about sharing repositories, sharing information, they're making these tools readily available to you and hopefully training you in the ways how to manage and maintain your code and your tests and your systems, and from known and unknown vulnerabilities.
Yes, indeed. There was one more point that I had. Oh, the CVEs, where patching, like CVEs are reported, or CVEs being common vulnerabilities and exposures. Those are usually reported after the vulnerability has been patched. But even after that vulnerability has been reported, patched, and everybody's out here evangelizing it, hey, you need to secure your systems for this. Some companies don't even do it then, which gives the attackers an opportunity to exploit these vulnerabilities.
Old
vulnerability, old exposures. And the point was, like, for the people who update more frequently are less likely to be attacked or exposed to these types of vulnerabilities. Because now everybody knows about it. So if you're running on some old code and they're poking around on your system with Metasploit or something like that, and they're like, oh, hey, that port's open. Hey, let's see what we can attach to this.
We can find.
Like, oh, you're running that version of Apache or whatever. Well, guess what? We're going to do a SQL injection on your application. So yeah, patch your stuff. That's my moral.
The moral of these two chapters: patch your stuff and don't put security at the end. I think we're done there. We've done.
Yeah, that sums it up very, very nicely.
It really, and there were tons of case studies. They jammed quite a few in these last two chapters. Did you notice that?
I did. I was trying to take notes so I can differ between the Etsy and the Twitter case study and a couple other ones, but they were
all starting to jot together. I agree. Yeah. So there was one about, when you hear the phrase shifting securely, shifting left. So if we're thinking about a line, and if we keep, security is usually at the end of it. It's at the farthest right end in a lot of organizations. But in the Fannie Mae case study on page 376, they're talking about shifting security left at Fannie Mae. And you think about how the old way, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, that you would hand off your code to ops, they would put it into production, security would run tests and send you back that PDF or whatever. And they realized that it was such a waste of time. And they started to train, like I mentioned, training developers how to use these tools. Don't keep them to yourself. Make them responsible for this is their work. Make them responsible for it. And then what will happen is, stop calling them, they've used, they've rebranded it. Instead of calling it vulnerabilities, they call it defects. These could definitely just be considered defects in your code. You're using a bad module, a bad package. Well, why don't you use something that's has been patched or whatever, or get the ones that are blessed from security. Again, sharing all the goodness inside of your repositories, sharing your tools, sharing your processes, really alleviates, doesn't get rid of them 100%, but it helps alleviate some of the issues that we're reading about here.
And last thing I'll say to that point is, I appreciated in that example and other parts of these chapters where they used a language that the developers use instead of making the language security specific. To your point of calling it a defect instead of a vulnerability, developers know that, oh, it's a defect, it's a bug, I got to fix this bug. They understand that. Or with I forget which scanner it was, but a scanner that used the Gherkin reporting format. And so that this was a format that developers use for their tests. And so when they see this report, they already know how to process it and act on it. Like, oh, I got to go to this line to fix this particular problem or whatever. So yeah, definitely making it easy for developers and operators to use security in a way that they understand it.
You're speaking their language, or you are you're all speaking the same language now.
Yes.
And
Yes.
having a common nomenclature in which to work. Like it seems so small, but you just said it. Speaking a developer's language, they understand the word defect, and they're not. You can't be afraid of a defect. You know, you got a bug, you fix it. So that's actually pretty important. You want to move on to 23?
Let's move on. I only have a few notes for 23, so yeah, we can totally move on to that.
All right. Change approval processes. What is your experience with them?
You know, they hit another gold standard talking about ITIL. So like ITIL, yes, ITIL is all over the board. ITIL being, and I'll see if I can do this off the dome, the information technology something library. I forget what that second I stands for. Information library. I don't know if you're listening live. Drop a comment that says what ITIL stands for. I'm not going to go to another tab and look it up. We're just going to press on with the discussion. But I appreciate it.
Is ITIL.
Yeah, ITIL. Yes. I appreciated that they brought that in early to saying like, hey, this is kind of the gold standard of tracking changes. They've got, you know, all the processes kind of dialed in for that, to the point of requests for change, the change board, and just kind of bringing that all together so we can track changes and not necessarily be scared of them. Like this was another point where they talked about making changes, and maybe I might be confusing 23. Chapter 23, that is, making it part of the developer's process by creating tickets like Jira tickets, making it part of the story, to say, hey, this is a security issue. I know that was from chapter 22. Hey, here's your Jira ticket. You could also do that with changes to say, hey, this is a change that we want to make. Here's the ticket for the change. You run it through the approval process and bam, you're ready to make that change and everybody's on the same page for it.
And they also mentioned, they did specifically meant, linking your change request to your Jira tickets. That was in 23. But so also in this chapter, they talked about the types of changes. You know, there are standard changes, there are normal changes, there are urgent changes. And they talked about looking at the types of tickets that are coming in and working on ways to make things, you know, more standard where they're lower risk. You've remediated a lot of the issues around it. You've built a track record fixing such issues that you've automated this thing away, right? So you don't have to, these problems that you may have used a change review board with or something, they're so passe at this point because you've automated them away. You don't have to sit and wait for those types of changes. So I never heard of that. Like you have a problem and you fix it in such a way that it becomes like a non-event.
Yes,
that's the word I'm going to use because we used it before. You have like a non-event, and it's just we have it in our development flow. It gets fixed, and boom, it's less of an issue, and it doesn't have to go through change board or things like that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. One other thing that I appreciated from this particular chapter, this was another Etsy case study where they had 2 laptops for project separation. And I forget how that tied into I think it was more talking to compliance as opposed to change management.
It was.
Where like to stay compliant for one particular project, they couldn't mix how they were working with some other project. So they're like, hey guys, you're going to use a separate laptop when you're working on this particular project. And if you need to like check Facebook and all the other stuff, you're going to use this other laptop over here so we can keep these things separated. And I was like, okay, that's cool. You know, it's a total isolation of these 2 things that have to stay compliant for whatever the purpose was. And they can prove that they are compliant. They have that separation because they have separated the interface to the work itself.
Yes. I don't remember. I'm trying to remember was it a happy end? I mean, of course it was a happy ending, but you have to help me out here. Did they realize that was a good thing, or it was slowing them down and they had to like refactor how they did that? I
can't remember. I think it was a good thing though.
Okay.
I'd have to flip back. But you reminded me though of the happy path, the sad path. What were those paths?
Yeah.
It was in software, or rather in the security section. Oh, the user path, the happy path, and the sad path, where the user path is what everybody kind of does. The happy path is what you hope they will do. And the sad path is what kind of actually happens when you haven't patched things, you haven't kept stuff up to date, when security isn't considered, I guess when you're not compliant, when you're not tracking your changes. That's when things really, really go bad on that sad path. Yeah.
There was another case study. I'm going to say it. One was Capital One, and near the end. And the moral of this story here is, again, focusing on their customers' needs, very important. Making things easier for the developers by having a sort of standard whatever, using standard tools, maybe standard languages. And what that allowed them to do is to react faster to certain situations, because again, everybody's speaking the same language. So standardizing on tools and languages and processes versus this bespoke thing that a lot of organizations still do to this day. But think about how much quicker issues can be resolved when people are using, again, we use the term, speaking the same language. And that was in Capital One. That was not the last case study, but it was definitely one of those ones that I'm like, I like it. I like it. There's like 4 more after that one.
Definitely. They pack in the case studies, indeed.
But I think that's good. Like you can see yourself. Depending if you read through the book, which I hope everyone does after we've done this. I hope everyone does. If you work in technology in any way where you're writing the code, responsible for the code, or securing the code, or you're in marketing that's bringing in the new users, wherever you are, I hope you read this book. And if you haven't implemented DevSecOps into your organization, you can make a case for it. And notice, in the back of the book, I think it was not even the conclusion. It might have been the call to action or something else, where they said, now you can bring it in and it's successful and everyone worked. But what if someone leaves? And what if someone new takes over and that person doesn't see the value? Organizations can devolve. You know what I mean? Into these, I don't want to call it Lord of the Flies, but it devolves. It's like, okay, we were doing so well here. And, people leave and they take that skill set with them elsewhere, because they found that this is the Holy Grail. This is how we want to do our work. And, so I never thought of that, but we see it happen all the time.
Yeah, no doubt. And I when I read that, I thought about, I think it was Richard Branson who said, or responding to one of his employees, like saying, well, what if we train our people and they leave? And his response is like, what if we don't train them and they stay? You know what I'm saying? It's just like, you can't be afraid of leveling your people up. And if they leave, they're going to take good practices with them. That's what I say. It's like, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to take everything that you've learned here, and I want you to evangelize wherever you go. Tell them how good we were doing it back here, wherever you're leaving from. But what you're not going to do is you're not going to stay here and just be status quo. If you stay here, you're going to level up. You're going to level up everybody around you, and we're going to make this thing better. So yeah, I think at least that's what I heard when they prompted that call to action. It's like, you got to take that chance. You got to take that risk to make things better, because when you know better, you do better. And if you read this book, then you know better. If you listen to this podcast or you're inspired to read the book, then you know that much better that this is a resource that you can tap into down the road or throughout your career.
Yes, always. I had a person on LinkedIn who we follow each other, and he's internet famous. And he said, oh, I'm enjoying y'all discussions around this book. And I was like, wait a minute, Mr. Kubernetes. Thank you. Thank you for appreciating this. I appreciate it so much, because he works at a huge technology company, and to be able to, he reads this book, he read the second edition, he had to go back to it and learn a little bit, because technology is always changing. So the next edition will be even more case
Yeah.
studies, and it'll be even more in depth. So we won't be reading third edition, not here, but
No time soon anyway, right?
no time soon. But that was yeah, we enjoyed this. I enjoyed it. Now we need to worry about the next book.
Okay, and let me put that up there. I've been waiting to tap that banner to say, what are we going to read next season? If you are live on the live stream and you want to share something that you're interested in us reading along with you, you could drop that in the comments. If you are watching the replay on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, or X, whatever the kids are calling it these days, shout us out. Let us know what you're interested in reading, and we will definitely consider that, because I don't know about you, Angela. I had fun working through this book, discussing it with you, sharing it with the people that are watching and listening. And I'm looking forward to the next round already. Like at part 4, I was like, oh man, what are we going to read next? You know, and here we are, like, 3 weeks later, and or how much later, getting ready to move on. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. What are we going to do next?
Hit us up with any suggestions using the hashtag cover to code wherever you are. We're on Twitter. I'm calling it what it is. We're on LinkedIn, wherever. You know how to get in touch with us. Let us know what we should read next, because we might take a week off. I don't know. We might have something up the sleeve next week. I don't know, but we want to know
we'll see what happens
next. And it is my hope that there's actually some coding involved. Like, that would be so legit. Get your thinking caps on, and so so it is called Cover to Code.
Cover to Code. Get your swag ready.
Swag. I feel bad because his swag is still sitting in a box waiting to be taken.
All in due time.
I am the worst. But it's all in love. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But yes, I guess we'll see you soon.
Yeah, we will be back here at your same time, same channel, however you're picking this episode up.
Right.
We will see you here soon.
All right, everybody. Take care.
All righty.